My mother raised her glass in the middle of their wedding anniversary celebration and told everyone that one daughter made her hold her head high, while the other was only good at cleaning up other people's lives. The whole room burst into laughter. My sister laughed the loudest. My father lowered his head and slowly turned the glass in his hand, as if the wooden table had suddenly become far more interesting than his own daughter. My name is Naomi Carter. I am 32 years old. That night, standing in the house where I grew up, I understood exactly who they thought I was. A shadow. An embarrassment kept around only for the sake of family manners. But what no one in that room knew was that just 3 weeks later, those same people would be sitting beneath crystal chandeliers, surrounded by more than 600 guests, watching me walk across a stage to accept an award they had never once imagined I deserved. To understand why my mother's comment that night made the whole room laugh so easily, you need to understand the Carter family. We lived in Buckhead, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Atlanta, where the lawns were always perfectly trimmed and the houses always looked as if they were ready for a magazine photo shoot. My parents bought that house in 1997, when I was 4 years old. It had 4 bedrooms, a pool in the backyard, and a large kitchen big enough to host parties for the entire neighborhood. My mother always said it was the kind of house a successful family should live in. My mother, Patricia Carter, was 59 years old. She had been an elementary school teacher for more than 20 years before retiring. She believed in 3 things: God, reputation, and her eldest daughter. My father, Ronald Carter, was 63. He had spent almost his entire career working as an accountant for a financial firm in downtown Atlanta. He was the kind of man whose silence people often mistook for wisdom, but I knew better. It was simply the way he avoided conflict. His favorite line was, "You know your mother only wants what's best for you, Naomi." He said it when my mother compared me to my sister. He said it when she criticized my career choices. He said it every time I left the dinner table feeling like I didn't belong there. And then there was my sister, Dr. Evelyn Carter Brooks. She was 35 years old, a cosmetic dermatologist and co-owner of a high-end clinic in Atlanta, where the clients drove expensive cars and talked about European vacations as casually as grocery shopping. Her husband, Michael Brooks, was a corporate lawyer, a tall, polished man who wore suits even to family dinners. They had 2 children, a 7-year-old boy and a 4-year-old girl. They lived in a large house in Alpharetta with a 3-car garage and an entertainment room my mother loved bragging about to her church friends. My mother posted about Evelyn on Facebook almost every week. Photos of Evelyn at medical conferences. Photos of Evelyn at charity fundraisers. Photos of Evelyn holding a glass of champagne at events I was never invited to. My mother's profile description had only one line: proud mother of Dr. Evelyn Carter Brooks. My name was nowhere in it. I used to scroll through her Facebook page late at night, when my small apartment was silent and the light from my phone screen was the only thing illuminating the ceiling. I looked to see if there was a photo of me anywhere. In 3 years, I found exactly one. It was from Easter 2023. I was standing behind the dining table, slightly out of focus, carrying a tray of food. My mother hadn't even tagged me. In my parents' living room, there was a wall my mother called the memory wall. 15 framed photos hung in perfectly straight rows. Evelyn's wedding photo. Evelyn graduating from medical school. Evelyn holding her first son. Evelyn and Michael at a formal gala. Evelyn in a red dress. Michael in a tuxedo. I once stood there and counted. Evelyn appeared in 13 of them. I was in 2. One was my high school graduation photo. I stood between my parents wearing my graduation cap and smiling a smile that I now realize never reached my eyes. The other was from Evelyn's baby shower. I was in the background holding a gift box. That photo was partially hidden behind a decorative plant. Growing up, I was always Evelyn's little sister, never just Naomi. When teachers read the class roster and saw the Carter name, their faces would light up. Are you Evelyn Carter's sister? Your sister was such an outstanding student. Then their expressions would dim slightly when they realized I was just an average student, a B+ average. Not valedictorian, not the star of the class. In my family, being pretty good was the same as failure. When Evelyn graduated from medical school, my parents threw a party for more than 50 guests. They rented out an entire small restaurant. There was a live band. My mother gave a speech that lasted almost 15 minutes and brought several people to tears. When I received my medical assistant certificate at 22, my mother glanced at the paper in my hands and said, "Well, that's nice, honey. Could you pass me the salad?" No party. No congratulations. Just salad. When Evelyn bought her first house, my parents gave her $30,000 for the down payment. When I moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Decatur with bars on the windows, my mother asked, "Do you really need to live alone, Naomi? Staying here would save you a lot of money." When Evelyn announced her engagement to Michael, my mother cried tears of joy for almost 20 minutes. When I brought my first serious boyfriend home, my mother asked what he did for work, then spent the rest of dinner talking about how Michael had just been promoted at his law firm. The message was always clear. In the Carter family, there was Evelyn, and then there was everyone else, including me. For 6 years, I worked at my sister's clinic. Carter Brooks Aesthetics was located in a bright glass building in Midtown Atlanta. The waiting area had cream velvet chairs, soft piano music played through hidden speakers in the ceiling, and the patients who walked in usually carried expensive handbags while talking about vacations in Aspen or Napa, as if those trips were as ordinary as grocery shopping. I was not a doctor, and I was not a manager. I worked at the front desk. I checked patient files, prepared treatment rooms, managed appointments, and sometimes cleaned up when the janitorial staff had not arrived yet. The job was not glamorous, but I did it as if my life depended on it, because in some ways it did. I was 26 when Evelyn called me one afternoon in March. "Naomi, the clinic needs someone at the reception desk. I told the office manager you might be a good fit." I still remember her voice on the phone, cold and precise, as if she were making a business announcement rather than helping her younger sister. "I'm doing this as a favor, Naomi. Don't make me regret it." I didn't. For the next 6 years, I arrived earlier than everyone else and left after the lights in the clinic had been turned off. I learned every patient's name, remembered their allergies, knew who was afraid of needles and who needed a few extra minutes to calm down before a procedure. I was the one who sat beside anxious patients before they went into the treatment rooms. I was the one who stayed until 9 o'clock at night reorganizing the supply closet because no one else wanted to do it. I never called in sick. I never complained. And I never once told any patient that the famous doctor who owned the clinic was my sister. I wanted to be recognized for myself, not as Evelyn's little sister, just Naomi. For a long time, I believed that was happening. Patients began asking for me when they walked through the door. "Is Naomi here? She always knows exactly what I need." Small compliments like that felt like drops of water in the desert to me. Then one Monday morning, everything ended. It was October, and the weather in Atlanta had just begun to turn cold. I was organizing patient files when the operations manager walked over. Sandra Whitmore, a woman who always wore dark blazers and spoke in a cool, professional tone. "Naomi, could you come to my office for a moment?" The sentence sounded normal, but the look in her eyes did not. Inside her office, she sat behind her desk with a folder placed neatly in front of her. "Naomi, please sit down." I sat, my heart beating a little faster, but I didn't expect anything bad. "We have received some feedback about your work performance." I blinked. "What kind of feedback?" She avoided my eyes. "Some patients have said they felt uncomfortable interacting with you." Uncomfortable? I repeated the word as if it were a foreign language. What did I do? Sandra took a short breath. We've decided to terminate your employment, effective immediately. The room seemed to tilt. 6 years. More than 2,000 working days. A record without a single complaint. And it all ended in one sentence. You have 20 minutes to collect your personal belongings. HR will send you your final payment. 20 minutes. I walked into the hallway carrying a cardboard box. Inside the box were 3 things. A coffee mug, a small plant I had kept on my desk for more than 3 years, and an old family photo I once kept there to remind myself that I belonged somewhere. As I walked down the long corridor toward the back exit, I saw that Evelyn's office door was open. She was sitting with her back turned to me, talking on the phone. She laughed. A light, comfortable laugh. Completely normal. She didn't turn around. She didn't ask what was happening. She didn't even notice me leaving. 2 weeks later, I received a phone call. It was Rachel, the receptionist who had worked beside me for nearly 4 years. Naomi, I think you should know something. Her voice was shaking. Know what? There was a long silence. Then Rachel spoke very softly. Evelyn told Sandra that you were a risk to the clinic. I said nothing. Rachel continued. She said you made patients uncomfortable, that you had a negative attitude, that the clinic's image would be better without you. I was standing in the Walmart parking lot when I heard that. The wind pushed empty metal carts across the pavement and the sky above was gray. None of what Rachel said was true. Naomi, everyone here knows that. Rachel said quietly, but Sandra would never argue with a doctor, especially not with one of the clinic's co-owners. The call lasted 11 minutes. I remember exactly because I stared at my phone the entire time, watching each second pass as if every one of them was grinding something inside me down. After Rachel hung up, I sat in my car. 1 hour, 2 hours. I didn't cry. I just stared at the steering wheel and tried to understand how my own sister could do that to me. I had $3,200 in credit card debt. No job, no references, and no explanation I could give my parents without making them believe I was attacking their perfect daughter. So I didn't tell them. I said I wanted to change direction. My mother sighed and said, "Maybe you should find something more stable. That job always seemed a little too demanding for you anyway." I nodded. That night I called the only person in the family I thought would actually listen to me. Aunt Denise. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. Naomi? The moment she heard my voice, she asked, "What happened, honey?" I told her everything. The clinic, the call, the lies, the truth about Evelyn. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end. Then Aunt Denise spoke slowly. "Naomi, I have been the family disappointment for more than 30 years. She paused. "If you want my advice, this is the only thing I can give you. Don't let them see you bleed. And don't let them see you heal either. Just live. One day they will see everything they missed." That night when I hung up the phone, I was no longer Evelyn's little sister. I was a woman who had just lost everything, and who was about to start over from nothing. After I was fired, I still had to pay rent. It was a small apartment in Decatur, 1 bedroom, slightly yellowed white walls, a window that looked out over the parking lot. At night, the street lamp outside cast a pale glow into the living room that made everything look like an old photograph. I had $3,200 in credit card debt, no job, no plan, and a family who believed I simply was not capable of holding on to a real career. So I did what many people in that situation would do. I took any job that brought in money. The first one came through a friend of Aunt Denise. An older woman in Sandy Springs needed someone to clean her house twice a week. Her name was Margaret Langford. She was 74, widowed, and living alone in a house so large it took me weeks to remember every room. She paid me $150 each visit, Tuesdays and Fridays, in cash. During the first few months, the work was simple. I mopped floors. I scrubbed bathtubs. I vacuumed expensive carpets that I was constantly afraid of ruining. It was the kind of work my mother would have called proof that I was never going to succeed. But something strange began to happen. I started noticing things that were not on the cleaning list. Unopened bills stacked on the kitchen counter. A garage door that had been stuck for 6 months. A refrigerator full of expired food because Mrs. Langford could not remember what she had already bought. One morning, I did something she had never asked for. I sorted all of her bills into neat stacks according to their due dates. The following week, I called a repairman to fix the garage door. I cleaned out the refrigerator, wrote a grocery list, and taped it to the door. When Mrs. Langford saw everything I had done, she began to cry. "No one has ever done something like this for me," she said, "not even my own children." That was when I realized something important. Wealthy people do not just want clean houses, they want their lives to run smoothly. They want someone who can see the quiet chaos around them and fix it without making a scene, without making them feel dependent, just making everything easier. I began paying closer attention. I remembered when Mrs. Langford needed to schedule a doctor's appointment. I organized her closet by season. I left small notes reminding her to take her medication. A month later, she introduced me to a friend of hers, a woman in Buckhead, who needed help reorganizing her house after a renovation. That job led to another client, and then another. Gradually, I was doing far more than cleaning. I was managing their households, scheduling repairs, preparing homes before guests arrived, organizing kitchens, coordinating service staff. These people did not need a house cleaner, they needed someone to orchestrate the chaos of their lives. I began taking notes. I wrote down processes, what worked, what did not, what should always be done before a dinner party, what should never be forgotten before guests arrived. A year later, I made a decision that honestly frightened me. I started a company. I named it Larkspur Household Management. The name sounded far more elegant than the reality that I had begun by scrubbing other people's floors. The business registration fee was $50. The woman behind the registration counter asked what my company actually did. I answered simply, "We make life easier for busy people." She laughed. I did not. The first year nearly broke me. I worked 14 to 18 hours a day. In the mornings, I cleaned houses. In the afternoons, I ran errands for clients. At night, I taught myself how to run a business through YouTube videos and business books borrowed from the public library. I hired my first 2 employees, Maria, a house cleaner I met during a job in Buckhead, and Daniel, a driver who was between jobs. We took every client we could find, cleaning up after parties, reorganizing garages, preparing homes before guests arrived for the weekend, anything that made someone's life more orderly. By the end of the first year, we had 11 clients and about $4,000 in monthly revenue, enough to pay salaries, enough to keep the company alive, but certainly not enough to impress anyone in my family. In fact, they did not even know. Whenever my mother asked what I was doing, I simply said, "I'm just cleaning houses, Mom. Odd jobs here and there." She nodded and said, "Well, as long as you can pay your rent." Everything might have stopped there if not for one evening in April. I was working in a large house in Buckhead when the homeowner received a frantic phone call. She was hosting a dinner for 12 important guests. The catering chef was stuck in traffic. The serving staff was late. The dining table had not been prepared, and a gift for a VIP guest had gone missing. The multi-million-dollar house suddenly looked like a stage of pure chaos. I looked around, and then I started moving. I called a nearby catering service. I reset the dining table. I found the missing gift in a storage room and wrapped it again. I assigned Maria and Daniel the remaining tasks. 45 minutes later, the dinner party unfolded as if everything had been planned for days. When the last guest left, the homeowner looked at me in a way that felt different. "Naomi," she said slowly, You are not a house cleaner. You just saved my entire evening. A week later, she introduced me to a woman named Helena Whitmore. Helena owned a chain of boutique resorts in Savannah and a private members club in Atlanta. We met in her office, a large wooden desk, wide windows overlooking the city. Helena studied me for a long moment before speaking. "Everyone promises discretion," she said. "What makes you different?" I thought about all the years I had spent feeling invisible in my own family. Then I answered honestly, "I have spent my entire life being invisible. I know how to make other people's lives feel perfect without making them feel controlled." Helena did not laugh. She slid a contract across the desk toward me. $28,000 per month. I stared at the number for a long moment. "Can you handle it?" she asked. I said yes. The truth was that I had no idea if I could. But I learned. I hired more staff. I built training processes. I created quality control systems. Helena signed a second contract, then introduced me to 2 other resort owners. By the end of year 3, Larkspur Household Management had more than 40 employees. We served some of the most discreet private properties and boutique resorts in Georgia. That year, our revenue approached $2 million. Yet I still drove my old car, wore simple sweaters, and lived in that same small apartment in Decatur. And every time my mother asked what I was doing with my life, I gave her the same answer. "I'm just cleaning houses, Mom." She never asked another question. No one in my family did. And while they looked the other way, I quietly built an empire. In silence. If you have ever had someone in your own family make you feel invisible inside the very house you grew up in, I would truly like to hear your story. Leave a comment below and tell me about it. And if you are watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. Trust me, what happened during that anniversary night turned out to be far worse than I ever expected. My parents' anniversary fell on a Saturday evening in early fall, 35 years of marriage. For my mother, it was not just an anniversary, it was an event, a small performance of the perfect family she always wanted the world to see. The drive from Decatur to Buckhead took about 20 minutes. The Atlanta air that evening was cool, the breeze light, the sky a deep velvet blue. The familiar roads carried me back into the neighborhood where I grew up. I was wearing dark jeans, a gray sweater, and a pair of boots I had owned for more than 3 years. Nothing remarkable. Nothing that would make anyone ask questions. I brought a gift with me, a bottle of vintage champagne that I had spent time reading reviews about before buying. Not too expensive, but formal enough for a couple celebrating 35 years together. I also brought a small photo album. I had spent 2 evenings printing old pictures of my parents from the 80s and 90s, photos of them when they were young, their wedding day, pictures from when Evelyn and I were children. I knew there was a good chance my mother would set the gift on the table and never open it in front of me, but I brought it anyway, a stubborn habit of people who still hold on to hope. I parked at the far end of the driveway, where I always parked. The closer spots were usually saved for Evelyn and Michael, her white Lexus and his black BMW. When I stepped through the front door, the clock in the living room read 5:15 p.m. The house was already full. I could hear glasses clinking, laughter, and my mother's voice carrying slightly louder than normal as if she were performing. I found her in the kitchen. "Naomi, you're here." She looked at me for less than a second before turning back to stir a pot of sauce. "Good. Could you check the bread tray? It looks a little dry." No hug, no question about how I had been, no welcome. Just a task. I set the champagne and the album on the kitchen counter. "Yes, Mom." There were 16 people in the living room. My parents, Evelyn and Michael, their 2 children running around the backyard, Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, and her husband, 2 of my mother's church friends, a couple of neighbors who had lived next door to us for nearly 20 years, and another doctor who worked with Evelyn. I knew most of them. They had watched me grow up. They had seen me sitting at the end of the table at family gatherings. They had heard my mother talk about Evelyn hundreds of times. To them, I was simply the rest. For the next 2 hours, I barely sat down. I carried trays of bread into the living room. I refilled glasses with water. I cleared appetizer plates and returned to the kitchen. Whenever my mother needed something, she simply glanced around the room, and her eyes always stopped on me. Naomi, could you bring more ice? Naomi, check the oven for me. Naomi, straighten the napkins. 4 times, 6 times, 8 times. No one asked if I wanted to sit. No one said, Naomi, take a break. I moved between the kitchen and the living room like a familiar shadow. At one point, while I passed through the room carrying a tray of glasses, my nephew tugged gently at my sleeve. Aunt Naomi. Yes, sweetheart. Why are you always in the kitchen? Before I could answer, Evelyn laughed from the sofa. Because Aunt Naomi is the best at keeping everything clean. She said it lightly, like an innocent joke. A few people laughed. A few smiled politely. Aunt Carol looked down into her wine glass as if she was unsure how to react. Then the conversation moved on. At 6:45 p.m., we all sat down at the table. The large dining table was covered with a white cloth, napkins folded into fans, my parents' wedding china placed carefully in front of each seat. 16 places arranged perfectly. My seat was at the end of the table near the kitchen door, in case someone needed something. My mother stood up with a glass of red wine in her hand. Before we eat, she said, I would like to say a few words. The room fell quiet. I want to thank God for this wonderful family, for my husband Ronald, who has stood beside me for 35 years. My father nodded awkwardly. For my grandchildren who bring so much joy into this house. The children giggled. And for my son-in-law Michael, who takes such good care of Evelyn. Michael raised his glass. And especially for my daughter Evelyn. My mother's voice warmed. A doctor, a mother, a pride. Evelyn smiled the perfect smile she used in every photograph. My mother paused, then her eyes shifted toward me, and of course Naomi. Another pause, different this time, heavier. I have 2 daughters. One is a doctor. She gestured with her glass toward Evelyn. The other. She gave a small laugh. Well, at least she knows how to keep other people's houses very clean. The table erupted in laughter. Laughter from several directions. My mother's church friend laughed. The neighbors laughed. Michael laughed. The doctor who worked with Evelyn laughed. Evelyn laughed the loudest. My father did not laugh. He looked down at his plate. Aunt Carol did not laugh. She gripped her napkin tightly in her hand. But the rest of the room laughed, and my mother kept smiling as if she had just told the cleverest story. I felt the room shrink around me. The laughter pressed against my ears. 16 people. 16 people just reminded that I was the least valuable thing in this family. Something inside me shifted. Slowly. Cold. Clear. I set my glass of water down. I placed my napkin on the table. I stood up. The laughter stopped. My mother looked at me. Naomi, what's wrong? I met her eyes. Mom, I want to thank you. She blinked in confusion. Thank you for making it very clear tonight in front of everyone exactly where I stand in this family. The room was completely silent. I hope one day you remember this moment, because I know I will. I pushed my chair in, picked up my bag, and walked out the front door. I did not slam it. I did not need to. When I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of a pharmacy about 3 miles from my parents' house, my phone began to vibrate. 7:34 p.m. The name on the screen was Aunt Carol. I almost did not answer. I thought she was going to tell me I had overreacted, that I had embarrassed my mother. But something made me press the button. Naomi. Her voice was trembling. "I need to tell you something. I should have told you months ago." I said nothing. "I accidentally sent you an email in August. It was meant for Evelyn, but I clicked the wrong name. When you didn't reply, I thought maybe you never saw it." "What email?" "Check your spam folder. The subject line is what to do about Naomi." My hands turned cold. I opened my email. The spam folder had more than 2,000 unread messages. I typed the subject line, and it appeared immediately. A long chain of emails, 47 messages between my mother, Evelyn, and Aunt Carol. The first one was from more than 1 year ago. "Girls, I need advice. There is a family event coming up, and I do not know what to do about Naomi. If someone asks what she does, what am I supposed to say?" Then an email from Evelyn. "Don't worry. Just keep her in the kitchen like always." Another email from my mother. "Sometimes I wish I only had one daughter." I stopped reading and stared at the sentence again. "Sometimes I wish I only had one daughter." My fingers trembled as I scrolled down. An email from last month. Evelyn wrote, "Don't worry, Mom. After the anniversary this week, she will finally understand her place." I stared at the screen. The toast tonight had not been spontaneous. It had not been accidental. They had planned it. My own family had arranged an entire evening just to remind me that I did not belong. I sat in the car for 40 minutes, not crying, not shouting, just feeling something strange and sharp, as if someone had suddenly turned on the lights in a room I had lived in all my life. I created a new folder in my email. I named it Evidence. Then I started the car and drove home. The next morning, I woke up very early, not because I had slept well, but because I had barely slept at all. Morning light spilled through the window of my small apartment in Decatur and spread across the white ceiling. I lay there for a few minutes, watching the pale lines of sunlight move slowly overhead, while my mind kept returning to the emails I had read in the car the night before. 47 emails, more than 1 year of conversations between my mother, Evelyn, and sometimes Aunt Carol. They spoke about me the way people talk about a problem that needs to be managed, an inconvenience that needs to be controlled, an embarrassment that needs to be hidden. Not once, not in a moment of anger, but again and again, carefully, deliberately. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and opened my laptop. The folder labeled Evidence was still there. I opened the emails one by one again. The words looked even colder in the morning light. "Naomi will never understand. Just keep her busy in the kitchen. Don't let her talk to the guests." "Sometimes I wish I only had one daughter." I read them a second time, then a third. Each time I read them, something inside me grew calmer. Not because the pain was fading, but because everything was finally clear. All the years I had wondered whether I was being too sensitive, whether I had imagined their distance, whether I was overreacting. The answer was now sitting in front of me. No, they had really done all of it. Around 9:15 that morning, a new email appeared in my inbox. The sender was Helena Whitmore. I opened it. The subject line was short: Southeast Emerging Business Leader Award. I read the message slowly. "Dear Naomi, we are honored to inform you that you have been selected as this year's recipient of the Southeast Emerging Business Leader Award presented by the Regional Business Council. The ceremony will take place on December 18th at the Grand Regency Atlanta Hotel. The event will host more than 600 guests, including entrepreneurs, investors, and local media. Each award recipient will be provided with 10 guest invitations." Helena ended the message with a simple line: "I have watched your company grow from nothing. You deserve this recognition." I read the email 3 times. December 18th, 3 weeks away, 600 people, 10 invitations. I sat very still for a long time. Then I thought about the night before. 16 people around the dining table, the laughter, My mother raising her glass, the words she had spoken. At least she knows how to keep other people's houses clean. I closed my eyes and slowly an idea began to form. That afternoon, I called Aunt Denise. The phone rang twice before she answered. Naomi. Her voice was familiar, warm, direct. I take it last night didn't go well. I told her everything. The dinner, the toast, the chain of emails. I read several lines to her over the phone. On the other end, Aunt Denise was quiet for a long time. Finally, she let out a long breath. My God, she said. They actually wrote those things. Yes. Then I told her about Helena's email, the award, the ceremony, 600 guests, 10 invitations. Another long pause. Naomi, Aunt Denise said quietly, you know what you could do with those emails. I know. You could send them to the entire family, post them online, let everyone see who they really are. She paused. You could destroy the perfect image your mother has spent 30 years building. I looked out the window as a car passed through the parking lot, and the afternoon sunlight flashed across its windshield. I thought about that, I said, all night. And? She asked, and I realized that if I did that, I would become them. Aunt Denise did not speak. I don't want to destroy them, I said slowly. I just don't want to hide anymore. I want them to see me, truly see me. She was silent for a few seconds. Then I heard her laugh softly. So what are you going to do? I looked back at Helena's email on my screen. 10 invitations. I'm going to invite them. All of them. Mom, Dad, Evelyn, Michael. They will think it's just a business gala, a networking event. Aunt Denise burst into laughter. Oh my God, she said. They won't know you are the one receiving the award. No, I said quietly. They won't know. She went silent again. Naomi, are you sure about this? I have never been more certain of anything in my life. We talked for nearly an hour. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and began writing my speech. The first draft was full of anger. I wrote my mother's name, Evelyn's name. I quoted their emails and imagined standing on stage reading every line in front of them. The second draft was filled with sadness. I wrote about my childhood, about always trying to be good enough, about sitting at the end of the dinner table for 20 years. The third draft sounded bitter. The fourth sounded like I was begging for sympathy. The fifth was too long. The sixth was too short. By the seventh draft, I deleted almost everything. I stared at the empty screen for a long time. Then I realized something. The best revenge is not humiliating someone. It is becoming the person they can no longer dismiss. I did not need to read their emails in front of 600 people. I only needed to stand on that stage and tell my real story, the story of a woman who was fired, who started again from nothing, who built a company from a small apartment in Decatur, and let them sit in the audience, looking up, slowly realizing that the person they had spent years trying to make invisible was standing under the brightest lights in the room. 3 weeks. Only 3 weeks left. December 18th arrived faster than I expected. The 3 weeks passed like a gust of wind. During those days, I worked as usual. I met with my managers, reviewed the schedules for the teams, and signed 2 new contracts for Larkspur Household Management. None of them knew that the evening of the 18th would change the way certain people saw me forever. That morning, Aunt Denise arrived at my apartment at 9 a.m., carrying a large bag filled with brushes, hair clips, and a level of confidence I desperately needed. Are you ready? She asked as she stepped inside. I was standing in front of the bedroom mirror holding the dark blue dress I had bought the week before. $340. I had stood in the store for nearly 20 minutes before deciding to buy it. The dress was simple, elegant, nothing flashy. But when I put it on and looked at myself in the mirror, I noticed something strange for the first time in a very long while. I looked like someone who belonged in the room I was about to walk into. Aunt Denise stood behind me and placed her hands on my shoulders. "You look like a CEO." I kept my eyes on the mirror. "I am a CEO," I said quietly. She smiled. "Yes, you are." That evening, just as I was about to leave the apartment, my phone vibrated. An Instagram notification. Evelyn had just posted a photo. I opened it. She and Michael were standing in the grand lobby of the Grand Regency Atlanta Hotel, a massive crystal chandelier glowing above them. Michael was wearing a tuxedo. Evelyn wore an emerald dress. The caption read, "Networking night with my husband, blessed life." I stared at the image for a few seconds. They had arrived, and they had absolutely no idea. I arrived at the hotel at 6:30 p.m., not through the front entrance. Helena Whitmore had arranged for me to enter through the speaker access behind the stage. The hallway behind the ballroom was bright and quiet, and the sound of conversation from the audience echoed like distant waves. Helena was waiting for me. She wore a silver dress and carried herself like someone accustomed to commanding entire rooms. "Naomi." She hugged me. "Are you ready?" I stepped closer to the large curtain leading to the ballroom. Through a small opening, I looked out. The ballroom was enormous. Round tables covered in white cloth, each decorated with a small arrangement of desert flowers. More than 600 people filled the room. Entrepreneurs, investors, reporters. Exactly the kind of crowd my mother always said our family should associate with. And then I saw them. Table 14. My mother in a burgundy dress. My father wearing the same old suit he always wore to formal events. Evelyn and Michael beside them. They were talking, laughing, sipping champagne, completely comfortable, completely unaware of what they had come here to witness. Helena looked at me. "Are you all right?" I nodded. I had waited 3 years for this moment. The program began at 7 p.m. There were opening remarks from the organizers, a video about local businesses, a few smaller awards presented first. I barely heard any of it. My eyes kept drifting back to table 14. My mother leaned toward Evelyn, whispering something. Michael checked his phone. My father looked around the room with the slightly lost expression he always wore at large events. 7:45 p.m. The host stepped onto the stage. He was a well-known local news anchor with a deep, clear voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to present the most important award of the evening, the Southeast Emerging Business Leader Award." The ballroom fell silent. This award is given to an entrepreneur who has demonstrated the ability to build a business from nothing, someone who has created growth, jobs, and a meaningful impact on the community. My heart began to beat faster. This year's recipient built her company from a small apartment and a single client. He paused. Today, that company employs more than 40 people. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the audience. The business now serves some of the most respected boutique resorts and private properties in Georgia. This year, the company's revenue is approaching $2 million. The atmosphere in the room changed. It was no longer polite attention. It was respect. The founder of this company faced doubt, he continued. People who said she would never become anything significant. He paused again, then spoke slowly. "Tonight we are here to prove them wrong." I took a deep breath. He looked down at the card in his hand. "Please welcome to the stage, Naomi Carter." I heard my mother gasp sharply just before I stepped out. The curtain opened. The stage lights hit my eyes. I walked forward. 600 people were watching. Among them were 4 people who had spent most of my life convincing me that I did not belong in any room at all. I walked to the podium without looking at them yet. I placed my hands on the edges of the lectern and adjusted the microphone. The entire ballroom was silent. "Thank you," I said. "Thank you to the Business Council and to Helena Whitmore for believing in me." My voice was steady. 4 years ago, I was fired from my job. A few heads in the audience tilted with curiosity. I had $3,200 in credit card debt, no plan, and no one who believed I would accomplish anything remarkable. I paused. At table 14, my mother had straightened in her chair. So I started cleaning houses. A few people laughed gently in the audience, not out of mockery, but because they assumed it was a humble beginning. I looked across the ballroom. But I didn't just clean houses. I learned how to notice what other people overlook. I learned how to turn chaos into order. I learned how to become invisible in a way that made others feel cared for. I paused again. My eyes finally moved to table 14. There were people in my life, I said. People who were supposed to love me, but they believed I was an embarrassment. Evelyn's face turned pale. My mother lifted her hand to her mouth. There were people who said I would never become anything important. I stopped for a moment, then spoke slowly. To those people, I want to say thank you. The ballroom was completely silent. Because your doubt gave me a reason to prove you wrong. A few people began to clap, then more joined in. I looked across the audience. This award is not only for me, it is for anyone who has ever been told they were not good enough, for anyone who has ever been treated like the other one, for anyone who has ever felt invisible inside their own family. I took a breath. If you are in this room tonight and you have ever felt that way, I want you to know one thing. You are not your family's opinion of you. You are not the box they try to place you in. You can become more than anything they ever imagined. I stepped back slightly. Thank you. One person stood and applauded, then 3 more. Then the entire ballroom rose to their feet. 600 people standing, the applause lasting nearly a full minute. I stood there under the lights and let the sound wash over me. At table 14, my family remained seated. They could not stand. After the ceremony, people moved into the reception area. Entrepreneurs shook my hand. Reporters asked for interviews. Helena hugged me tightly, but my eyes kept drifting toward the entrance. I knew they would come. And at 8:32 p.m., my mother appeared. She walked alone. Her mascara had smudged and her hands trembled when she stopped in front of me. Naomi, she said, why didn't you tell me? I looked at her, the woman who gave birth to me, the woman who once wrote that she wished she had only one daughter. Do you think you would have believed me? I asked. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. If I had told you I was building a company, would you have been proud or would you have found a way to compare it to Evelyn? My mother did not answer. I nodded. That's what I thought. Her eyes filled with tears. Naomi, I didn't mean... You did, I said quietly. You meant every word. I paused, then spoke more gently. I'm not angry with you. She lifted her head. I'm just done. I turned away. She called after me. Naomi, we're still family, aren't we? I stopped for a moment without turning around. We have always been family, I said. You just never treated me like it. Then I kept walking. 3 days after the gala, I had 12 missed calls from my mother on my phone. I did not answer a single one. She left voicemails, long disjointed messages that sometimes began with an apology and ended with words that felt painfully familiar. I'm sorry, but you also have to understand how this looks. I'm sorry, but you could have told the family first. I'm sorry, but you made your sister look terrible. I listened to the first 2 messages, then I deleted the rest. Evelyn sent me an email. The subject line was short. We need to talk. I did not open it. I archived the message and went on with my workday. My father called once. Only once, on the 4th day after the gala. I stared at his name on the screen for a few seconds before I answered. Naomi, he said, his voice low and unsteady. It's Dad. I know, I said. Then we were silent. The silence stretched between us like 32 years of unsaid things standing in the room. Finally he exhaled. I'm sorry. I said nothing. I should have said something years ago, he continued. I should have stood up for you. I should have told your mother she had gone too far. He stopped. But I didn't. I looked out the window of my office. Traffic moved slowly along the street below. Yes, I said. You should have. He fell silent again. But I still turned out all right, I added. On the other end, I heard him take a long breath, the breath of a man realizing too late that silence had always been a choice. I still love you, he said. I nodded even though he could not see me. I know. But love is not enough when you do nothing with it. The call lasted 6 minutes and 33 seconds. When it ended, I did not feel victorious. I did not feel angry. I only felt something quiet, something I had never felt before. Peace. I did not cut my family off completely. I did not block their numbers. I did not write some dramatic declaration saying I would never speak to them again. That was not who I was. But I did stop. For 32 years, I had always been the one who called first, the one who showed up first, the one who tried harder, the one who believed that if I were just a little more patient, a little more successful, a little more determined, they would finally see me. After the gala, I stopped. If they wanted me in their lives, they would have to walk toward me. That Christmas was the first holiday I did not spend at my parents' house. Aunt Denise and I flew to Maui, 1 week at a resort overlooking the ocean. We ate too much, drank too many Mai Tais, and every evening we sat on the balcony watching the sun sink into the water. One afternoon, when the last light of day turned the ocean gold and orange, Aunt Denise looked at me and asked, "Do you regret it?" "No," I answered immediately. "I only regret that it took me so long to see myself." My mother sent me a Christmas gift. I sent it back unopened. Some people would say that was petty. Some people would say I should forgive them, give them another chance, be the bigger person. But I had learned something. Forgiveness does not mean continuing to allow people to hurt you. Being the bigger person does not mean shrinking yourself down to fit inside someone else's expectations. I did not slam the door shut. I simply stopped holding it open for people who never intended to walk through it. In January of 2026, I received an unexpected email. The sender was Dr. Melissa Grant, a name I recognized immediately. She had been sitting at the dinner table on my parents' anniversary night, one of the people who laughed when my mother raised her glass. The email was short. "Naomi, I have thought a lot about that evening, not the gala, but the night at your parents' house." I laughed, she wrote, not because I thought your mother's comment was funny, but because I did not want to make things uncomfortable. I told myself it was none of my business. But when I saw you on that stage that night, when I heard your story, I realized something. When we see someone being treated badly, it is always our business. I am sorry, I said nothing. If you ever want to get coffee, not to talk about your mother or your sister, just to talk about life and what it means to survive a family that never really sees you, I would like that. I read the email twice, then I replied with a single word. Coffee. We met at a small cafe in Midtown the following week. 3 hours passed faster than I expected. We talked about family, expectations, and the invisible wounds that so many successful people carry. Melissa became one of my closest friends. It is strange how sometimes the people who hurt you can unintentionally lead you to the people who help you heal. If you are still listening to this story, I want to tell you something. This story is not about revenge. It is not about proving my family wrong. It is not about humiliating them in front of 600 people. That might feel satisfying for a few minutes, but it does not heal anything. This story is about freedom. For 32 years, I waited for my mother to be proud of me. I waited for my father to stand up for me. I waited for my sister to treat me like an equal. I waited, and waited, and waited. They never did. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe they simply didn't want to. But I learned something. I do not need their permission to exist. I do not need their approval to succeed. And I do not need their love to know that I am worthy of it. The gala was not about making them feel ashamed. It was the moment I stepped into the light, the moment I stood in front of 600 strangers and said, "This is me. This is what I built," whether my family acknowledges it or not. That night, they saw me. For the first time in my life, they truly saw me. But by then it no longer mattered, because I had already learned how to see myself. If you are listening to this story and you recognize yourself in it, if you are the other one in your family, the one who is compared, the one who is overlooked, the one they call an embarrassment, I want you to remember one thing. You do not need to prove anything to them. You do not need to wait for them to change. You only need to live, to build your life quietly, patiently, and one day, when you are ready, step into the light. They will see you. But by then, what will matter more is that you have already seen yourself. If my story reminded you of your own, I truly want to hear it. What would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have walked out of that dinner party? Or would you have confronted them right there at the table? Share your thoughts in the comments. I always read them. If this story touched you, please like this video so more people can find it. And if you want to hear more true stories about family, boundaries, and building a life on your own terms, please subscribe. I still have so many stories like this to tell. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and thank you for seeing me.